Welcome to this explainer. Today we're breaking down a monumental piece of history and theology from the year 1965. We're looking at a deeply foundational text from the Second Vatican Council. Honestly, whether you're studying religious history or you're just fascinated by how massive, centuries-old institutions adapt to the modern era, this document is an absolute must understand. We're going to strip away all the complicated jargon today and look exactly at what the main points of this text are, why it was so desperately needed at the time, what it fundamentally changed, and why its core messages are still totally relevant to us today. Okay, let's dive into this. The document is officially called Gaudium et Spes. Now, I know that's Latin, but it actually translates beautifully to joy and hope. Right off the bat, that sets a really specific, welcoming tone for the entire text. This isn't something designed to scold or condemn people. It's a foundational piece of Catholic social teaching, meant to establish a deeply positive connection. It serves as a major cornerstone for how the Church understands its own responsibility toward the modern world. So here's our roadmap for today. Don't worry, we're going to break all this complex theological history down logically into 5 simple areas so we can really grasp its core message. We'll start with 1. A monumental paradigm shift. Then 2. Solidarity, joy, and hope. Next, 3. Defending basic human dignity. Followed by 4. Redefining true peace. And finally, 5. Why it matters today. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, a monumental paradigm shift. To really get this, we need to explore the historical stakes and why this document was so urgently needed back in 1965. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it highlights the massive shift that took place. Before 1965, the Church often tended to isolate itself from the rapidly changing modern world. It was almost taking a defensive posture, right? But Gaudium et Spes completely flipped that script. It explicitly outlines the Church's responsibility to engage with the world rather than separate from it. It directly encourages active, deep engagement with society, with politics, and with culture. That is a massive paradigm shift. Moving on to Section 2, Solidarity, Joy, and Hope. Let's look at how this document fundamentally redefined the relationship between the followers of Christ and the rest of humanity. When you actually commit to actively engaging with the world, it demands a completely new sense of solidarity. Listen to this famous opening statement. The joys, hopes, griefs, and anxieties of humanity are also the joys, hopes, griefs, and anxieties of the followers of Christ. I really want you to let that sink in for a second. This is not some dusty academic relic. It is a radical, powerful declaration of universal empathy. But we have to ask ourselves, why was this empathy so revolutionary? Well, it's because it bridges the gap between having abstract, warm feelings and the tangible, concrete actions that the document actually demands. If humanity's anxieties are your anxieties, you can't just sit back and ignore them, right? You have to do something about it. Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, Defending Basic Human Dignity, because that revolutionary empathy we just talked about leads directly to a fierce defense of human rights. So, where does this defense come from? The source material argues that human dignity isn't just some abstract political concept. It is deeply rooted in the belief that all human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. That right there is the ultimate, non-negotiable justification for why every single person on earth deserves basic rights and respect. So the crucial point is how this philosophy translates directly into real, everyday life. The text outlines essential requirements for what it calls a truly human life. We're talking about food, clothing, shelter, education, employment, and freedom of conscience. The document views these not as privileges and definitely not as luxuries for the lucky few, but as strict, bare minimum requirements for human dignity. All right, let's head into Section 4, Redefining True Peace. Now we're going to see how the 1965 text zooms out to tackle the big macro concepts of global conflict and social justice. Let's move to and see how this builds a completely new framework. Step 1 here is the old view, the idea that peace is merely the absence of war. By that logic, if the guns aren't firing, hey, we have peace. But Step 2 shows the vital leap made by Gaudium et Spes. The text teaches that peace is much more demanding than that. Peace is actually the result of true justice and human fraternity. Basically, if there's systemic injustice, there is no real peace, even if things seem quiet on the surface. And because true peace absolutely requires true justice, the document takes a super firm stance in denouncing specific destructive practices. It explicitly calls out modern evils, violence, the absolute horror of human trafficking, and the creation of weapons of mass destruction. Remember, this text was finalized at the absolute height of the Cold War. The threat of global destruction was a very real daily anxiety for humanity, and it was an anxiety the Church was officially taking on as its own. Finally, Section 5, Why It Matters Today. Let's connect those anxieties from 1965 directly to the reality we are all living in right now. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why this matters. It's so easy to look at a text from the 60s and assume it's stuck in the past. But look at the concerns explicitly named back then: weapons of mass destruction, human trafficking, and violence. Now, think about the headlines you scrolled past on your phone this morning. The exact same issues the document warned about decades ago are the major crises we still face today. That's why this text isn't just a historical artifact. It's an enduring blueprint for justice that demands our active engagement today, just as strongly as it did when it was first published. We've seen how Gaudium at Spes called for a monumental shift from isolation to active engagement, how it demanded empathy, fiercely defended human dignity, and totally redefined peace. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to consider in your own life. If peace is truly more than just the absence of war, what are you doing to build true justice today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep actively engaging with the world around you.